All right, so today we're going to talk about incentive programs. Let's get started. We're talking about incentive programs, um, and I'm going to share my screen real quick here because we just have a few quick things to get through, and then we're going to make the slides go away and just have a really meaty conversation. So as I said, please introduce yourself in the chat. And something special, this community event is brought to you by Blueboard. And so they had something special for you all today. If you go to that URL there, blueboard.com/employee-appreciation, you can send an appreciation note to one of your colleagues or your boss or maybe your employee. Just let them know that you've been thinking of them, that you recognize something they did that was great. And if you do that, please feel free to share that in the chat too. Today we're talking about the truth about sales incentives that nobody really talks about. And I'm not going to spoil the secret to that for us now, but we're going to get pretty deep into some things. But we also want to take into account any questions you have. So if you want to troubleshoot your incentive program, maybe you're in the process of planning something for early next year, or even something related to SKO, or maybe you're thinking about revamping President's Club next year. All of those things, you can ask those questions. This is a safe space. We'll get you some good answers. And the good answers are going to be really good because they're coming from a cool panel. So we're going to talk about these topics here. I'm going to introduce our guests, or actually have them introduce themselves in just a second. You're going to learn how to think about your program, your incentive rules. You're going to talk about how to communicate it and drive engagement. One of our panelists just pointed out that if your comp plan is good, most salespeople will read it and memorize it, but not always so with incentives plans. So the communication and driving engagement is super important. Now we're going to talk about some more creative things you can do with incentive plans, in particular, experiential rewards. We've seen some really, really interesting results using experiential rewards. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how this can affect your whole sales culture. And you want a positive sales culture. You don't want one where it feels like you're only under the thumb of a quota, that there is, some joy in the work. We've got some questions for you too throughout. Let's have our panelists introduce each other. John, can I start with you, please?
Sure, I'm John Irvine. I'm head of business development at Blueboard, and very, very passionate about incentives and recognition. I've been in the industry a long time. I've designed hundreds of programs in dozens of industries, and it's a topic I love talking about. I'm looking forward to digging into it today.
Thanks, John. We're really happy you're here. Lacey, why don't you take us next? Tell us about yourself.
Yes, so I'm Lacey Mile. I'm currently a director of sales at Filevine. I also was a director of SDRs at Filevine as well, and previously worked at Carta over SDRs and account executives, so I've helped build comp plans as well as incentive plans. Excited to be here.
We're pumped to have you. Taylor.
Hello, I'm Taylor Jones. I am a sales leader at Salesforce, currently managing account executives. Previously, I managed the business development team at Salesforce as well. And a lot of my experience is in business development, outbound prospecting, and account executive comp plans, as well as incentive plans. So great to be here.
Thanks, Taylor. All right, and Dave Kennett.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Kennett from Replays. Been leading sales teams for a number of years, specifically in tech, and certainly advised for a number of small to medium to late stage startups, and super passionate about the topic of target design, comp design, and incentive design. So can't wait to dive in with this awesome group here.
All righty, and let's dive in. Folks who are here live, there's actually 4 of you now. So if you feel like you're ever just one person watching a bunch of people talk, remember that there are 44 people in the chat. So y'all should be having conversations. I'm gonna start with you. I'm gonna start with you all. The people in the audience, please let us know. Answer this poll. So tell us, what are the key challenges you're facing with your sales incentive programs? What things get in the way of your sales incentive programs driving awesome results for you? I think the results will be interesting for us to see, but it also help us shape the rest of the content of this webinar to your challenges. Let's get 10 more of you to answer, please. you haven't answered the poll yet, check it out. I want to make sure we have a good sample size. All right, you got 3 more seconds. Thank you all. This group is feisty. People are sliding in their answers in the last minute. All right, so let's see. I'll share the results with you all. All right, so the top ones look like sales incentives just aren't exciting, aren't creating buzz. Should be able to help with that. Some are too time consuming to plan. Should be able to help with that too. Limited resources to execute, socialize, or promote successfully. Very few people saying that their programs had unfair mechanics or structure or were unclear, which is good. It's good. Did anybody who wrote other, so there were 2 of you who wrote other. If you don't want to identify yourselves, that's cool. But if you had a different challenge, please drop that in the chat. We'd love to see that too. All right, now's when the slides go away. Let's do some talking. John, since you've been in this space for a long time, you've probably seen a lot of different ways to do this. I think the status quo for setting up sales incentive programs, what's the polite way to say this, doesn't always work well. Can you tell me and tell the group here why that is? Like, why do some sales incentive programs just kind of suck? What are the failings?
Yeah, the technical term, they suck. It comes down to, there are 3 main areas to any sales incentive, and they need to be spot on for it to be effective. And if one of them is not, it can easily become defective, or certainly not as effective as it should be. It could be. And I'll go through them real quickly. It's rule structure, communication, and rewards. And it's in that order of importance. And I say that as somebody who is associated with a rewards company, right? But the rule structure has to be done right. It has to be clear. It has to appear fair. People have to understand it. And sideways for a second, incentives should be positive, immediate, and certain, right? So it should be a good thing, duh. It should be immediate. So the closer the reward is to the behavior, the better. And it should be certain. There's no doubt. And the reason I bring that up is I just was talking to a company who shall remain nameless. The majority of their incentive program was be entered to win a prize. Every time you do X, you're entered to win a prize. Can't really imagine a worse incentive program structure. You need to have control over your own destiny. So that's an example of a bad structure. So the next 2 are communication and rewards. Communication is pretty simple, but it's critical. People really need to understand it, dive into it, pay attention to it. If they don't, they won't engage. And complex rule structure makes the communication much more difficult. And then the final one is rewards. The reward needs to be something that impacts the individual, because you're talking to a person. It's a marketing program at the end of the day, in an emotional way, right? Ideally, this is not a transaction. That's compensation, right? We should not be confused with compensation in any way. So, and I could talk about that for a long time, but those are the 3 hard ones, the hard, fast ones. It's rule structure, communication, rewards.
That's a good distinction, by the way, the incentive versus compensation. Maybe we should just make clear for people. Can you elaborate just a little further on, what we're talking about here today being incentives and not necessarily only that there's a difference, there's some overlap, and yeah, can you just elaborate there?
Yeah, I mean, people are getting compensated, right? They have to pay their mortgages, etc. And that's going to be their primary focus. Ideally, if it's a good comp plan, the salespeople know their comp plan. It's even true in a channel of distribution. Typically, there's going to be some sort of a spiff element or their own company's comp plan. And if what you're trying to do conflicts with that comp plan, then what you're trying to accomplish won't get done, right? They're going to do what's paying the mortgage. They're going to do what their manager is telling them to do because they need a good performance review at the end of the day. So, the word is complement with an E. An incentive program should complement the comp plan, not conflict with the comp plan. There really is a death knell for a sales incentive if it does.
Right on. Lacey, I saw you give a nod. And by the way, to Taylor, Dave, Lacey, feel free to just jump in. You don't have to wait for me. But Lacey, I saw you give a nod there when John said that sometimes they're in conflict. Do you have a story to tell us, maybe, or an example of incentive programs you've seen that don't work for any reason?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily in conflict, but I think a lot of times people think of salespeople and they're only motivated by money. So they only want spiffs to be additional dollars, which can work at times, but I really agree with John on the emotional side. So giving that experience, if you give someone $100, $1,000, whatever it may be, they might just put that in their bank account and it's used for bills, right? It's very transactional, like John mentioned. But if you give them an experience, that's when they're going to remember it and it's going to be more valuable, in my opinion, for helping change that behavior.
I think one thing I would add there as well is, when I think at the basic level, why have I been incented in the past? And when there's been great incentives for my teams, what is it that's been a common denominator? And a quick story I'll share is my daughter was sick a few weeks ago, and her mom works for a big company. And her boss heard that our daughter was sick and sent a coloring book. 2 days later, it arrived, or the next day or something. And my daughter's talked about that so much, and the pride that she feels in her mom, and the pride that her mom must feel with the fact that her company would do something like that. It put a human touch, a human element to it. And although, I think when we think about the feeling I want my team to feel when we're providing incentive, I think it's similar to that.
I love that. Absolutely love that story. And that's one of the things I like to talk about. It comes up more with recognition, but it applies just as much with incentives, is that companies are great at transactions, right? That's what companies are built to do, and they're really good at it. And they tend to establish a transactional relationship with their employees. What companies suck at is emotion. And that's an incentive program, and a recognition program is one of the rare opportunities for a company to connect emotionally, especially with its top performers, but with the people who are bringing the mail. And that emotional connection transcends anything transactional. That's why, if it's an incentive and not compensation, things like cash and gift cards, etc., they actually turn it into a transaction. So you've got this program that you designed to put a lot of time and energy into, and at the end of the day, the person's going, okay, I got $2 a piece for every time I did that, right? As opposed to, I'm learning astronomy in the backyard with my kids, and the astronomer's coaching us along, right? I mean, that's a whole different thing. I love that story, Dave.
Colin, I actually like what you wrote in the chat as well. We've done that on the SDR team, and it was actually a full team. If they hit a goal, the whole team went to dinner with the CEO. And that's just invaluable, right? Everyone wants time with the CEO, especially at the SDR level. You want to have that time to connect. Great opportunity there as well.
By the way, I love the whole team thing too. That's not what I did. I wish I had done that now. Because you said there's one assumption about salespeople that they're only motivated by cash. Or maybe that's not an assumption, but maybe, like to John's point, companies just default to that because we're in a transaction mode. Either way, another assumption is that sales is a lone wolf kind of thing. I mean, that word, that phrase even exists, which is silly. Almost every deal that I've seen come through in my entire career has involved a team selling. So that's pretty cool that you have a full team approach.
Yeah, I'll expand on that. Research has shown that team-based incentives will always be more successful than individual incentives. The challenge with team-based incentives is you have to be able to A, define the team, and then B, define the rule structure, and it's tricky. It's a very tricky thing, and I think that comes down to accountability across a team or to a team.
A couple great questions in the chat here. Taylor, I wonder if you can weigh in on this one. In a remote environment, Dave shared that great story, but in a remote environment, how can you kind of avoid that transactional approach to incentives and make something that's an emotional connection with the rep and connects to them as a person?
Yeah, it's a great question. I did a really interesting sales incentive last year where for every person that hit a specific metric, I can't remember what it was, in a certain time period, they got invited to this special workshop. And I didn't really disclose what the workshop was, just to keep it mysterious, and kind of create that excitement and buzz of like, what is this? What am I going to win? And what I actually did is I invited a bunch of senior tech leaders across Toronto that worked at other tech companies that were VP of operations, VP of marketing, VP of customer success, and got my team got to learn from them on like why they buy technology, why they like how they sell or how they like perform in their role, what metrics are important to them, what kind of buying channels they go through to buy technology. Which is great because if you think about Salesforce, we sell to all those personas, and they're all people that my team really wants to learn from and be able to accelerate their career by kind of being able to sell more and learn from these people. So we had this 1 hour workshop, and they got to just kind of ask. It was like an ask me anything session, and that was really great. My team absolutely loved that event, and we did record it. So those that couldn't join, we did share it with them in the end after because it was such a valuable event. But great for something that's kind of cross country and helps increase that engagement and excitement.
One question I have for John for you is around, come to the questions here in the chat about for in a remote environment, how we're wanting to provide incentives that matter, and back to the point of being tied to organizational goals. Where there's so many people that are passionate about so many different social aspects in life, giving back, whether it be environment or giving back for people in need or what have you. Have you seen much of a demand for people asking to tie different incentives into their organizational sort of triple bottom line or the not-for-profits that they're tied to? And do you see that being actually a rewarding thing for employees, like being part of giving back?
Oh yeah, that's a very popular experience. I mean, one of the options in most of our levels, we have plateaus of experiences by price point, is giving back, and it could be something to do with a social issue. It could be taking care of underprivileged, et cetera, but to give all or a portion of their reward. And people really do feel that, and we do that every day on behalf of people. That's a thing. And I've seen a lot of questions coming through about remote and how do you build emotional connection with remote teams. And, one of the things we like to say, I'm not doing a Blue Board commercial, one of the things we like to say is that we like people to challenge their comfort zones, indulge in their passions, and try new things, right? That's how we define experiences. And we have, we use Slack, and we have a Slack channel. We have lots of Slack channels, probably too many, but we have a Slack channel called Blue Boarding. And it's where our employees upload things that they did that are experiences. And oftentimes they've earned experiences from the company. And it's really cool because they get to experience the experience. And, they go into Iceland or, parasailing, whatever it's called, and learning to fly a plane, whatever it is, really cool stuff. I mean, they share it, they share images, sometimes videos, and everybody else in the company connects with that. So they have their lifetime memory. And sometimes it's a life-changing thing because now I fly planes. But it's an emotional connection. There's nothing about that channel in our Slack that is transactional. It's all just, hey, look what I did. Isn't this cool? And we found that our clients, participants, are doing the same thing. On whatever social media that they've got, whatever connection, whatever tool they use internally, because nobody's going to talk about, hey, I just got this, $2,500 check. Isn't that cool? But they will talk about the fact that I just went swimming with sharks. That's the kind of stuff that really, that's what gets me excited about
it. That doesn't sound like an incentive or a reward to me. Swimming with sharks, but that's really cool. It's cool that there's things like that.
If you don't hit your target, then that's the demotivator.
Right.
Remember I said the incentives have to be positive? Well, there's a negative, right?
Yeah.
Can we talk about, so I like that, I think that segues into the communication piece too, John, is like, you're communicating about the experiences that have been lived by the recipients of these rewards. What about when you roll out a new incentive program? Like, here's my story, right? I used to manage a sales team. If you've been on these sales hacker webinars many times before, you've heard me talk about this 1,000 times. But in a previous life, I managed a sales team, and I wasn't great at it. The way that I would, mention it at a team meeting. Hey, we've got this new spiff, new product launching. Number of meetings set or number of deals closed in this time frame. You get this. And then I might send one email about it halfway through the period, and then I would be disappointed with the pickup on that. Can any of you help me understand how I should be communicating about my incentive programs better than that?
I'm so passionate about this topic, so I am happy to start. I have seen so many incentive programs fail as a result of communication. I think it is the most important part of the program. For me, the biggest thing is it starts with why. So why are we doing this in the first place? So basic example of like you're trying to drive event registration. A lot of people spiff that. Like, hey, if you send like 100 registration invites, you get a gift card or you get this experience or whatever. It's like a very popular incentive that companies do. But to the conversation earlier, it kind of competes with potentially their comp plan if they don't understand how it relates to their comp plan. So like, why is driving registration going to help me hit my target is what is missing often in that communication of like, why are we doing this? Why is this important to you and you hitting your financial goals, your KPIs, as well as to the business? And so I think that the kind of first and foremost is like, why are you doing this? And being able to really communicate that message clearly. And then the other part of that is putting it in the forefront of people's faces every single day. I think like if there's one email, a week or one announcement, people forget about it. They have hundreds of competing priorities. Salespeople are like all over the place all the time, task switching between outbound and closing and internal meetings and certifications or whatever the heck else they have to do. And so they forget about this stuff if it's not always in the forefront of their face. So things like dashboards or scoreboards or daily emails or daily Slack posts for progression, I think is so important to make sure that is kind of followed through with and that people are excited about the program. And then last thing on that too is you can always hire or quote unquote hire a like spiff officer or somebody who helps you as a leader enforce these programs and excite about these programs and motivate. So that's a great way as a leader to also lean into your team from a leadership aspect to get them to help communicate as well.
That's a cool idea. I love the idea of the spiff officer.
I think it comes down to buy-in as well. Like if you backtrack everything, and I look at how I've rolled this out in the past, the ones that have been successful versus the ones that have not been successful are where it's something that the team's interested in. And it was interesting seeing the poll results where the biggest problems weren't necessarily communication or fairness. It was lack of time. I saw that as the big red flag. And I guess that's why companies like Blueboard exist, right? Like that's where I would go out to my team and I would say, hey, here's the menu of things I'm kind of looking at this year for different spiffs and rewards for spiffs. And what interests you, a quick poll, etc. And I think that buy-in, including them early on in the journey, and then taking it to someone like Blueboard and saying, okay, here's what they're interested in. Help me with the execution and all that other stuff. Because you can communicate all you want and have the spiff officer and stuff, which I think is a great idea. If you don't have the basic buy-in of the team at the very beginning of the journey, I think it's challenging. So I think that part to me has been a key to the successful ones we've rolled out.
Yeah, that's kind of a best practice, Dave. Generally speaking, is trying to identify certainly top performers in your sales organization or from your channel even, or among your CSMs or people that call on your channel partners, and including them in the design process of the incentive itself. That's critical. Now, if you're including the salespeople, they're typically going to tell you they want cash. Right? Forget everything else, just give me the cash. And there's lots of good reasons we can dive into at some point why that's not a good idea for an incentive.
I'm seeing a lot from more about specific ideas for remote sales teams, and certainly I'm probably not your best resource there, but I know you do it all day, every day, John. Are there some more tactical things you'd recommend to the team that are here watching? I know there's a lot of sales managers and directors and some CEOs and VPs that are probably want to leave here with like, 5 things that they can think about or something.
Yeah, there's no, after 2 years now, there's no magic bullet for remote sales teams, right? Can't do that. The one thing I'll say is that the emotional connection is more important than anything else. I mean, we're seeing on the HR side, burnout is a huge, huge challenge. And that's burnout of the HR people, by the way, who are fried, and burnout of their employees. And it's a lot of times, especially on the sales side, because as you mentioned, Colin, it can feel like you're a lone wolf, right? And when we're talking to sales teams, it's very, very, it's critical that people not feel like a lone wolf. And that's, incentives are not a panacea. They can't solve every problem. It's just nothing can. It's a combination. It's one arrow in the quiver of solving the greater challenge of remote work. And how do we, whether it's due to pandemic or whether it just happens to be a distributed sales force, right? It could be, it's always been distributed. There is value in coming together wherever that's possible. And we found that small groups, if you've got 75 salespeople, you get 75 people on a Zoom call. That's not going to be intimate, and you're not going to be bonding a lot, right? But you can break it down into smaller groups for whatever reason, and people will share and will feel connected, even if they're just complaining. They can at least hear each other complain. But any emotional connection, I think, is more important today than it has been ever. I think that's probably the best answer I can give. I don't know if Taylor or Lacey have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, I agree with everything everyone said so far, and this could be remote or in person, is salespeople are often competitive, right? So getting them involved in some sort of friendly banter, that's really helped as well. And you can help, I guess, spark that as well, whether it's a whole team incentive or team versus team, just friendly, like, I made 50 calls today. How many are you going to make, Dave? Stuff like that. I've really seen help drive stuff forward, mostly because they listen to us all day. And while it's important that we still call it out, they want to hear why we're driving to those goals from someone else. So getting other people involved is very helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree. On that note, I've seen like sales fantasies work really well. I've done a couple different incentives like that where it's person versus person. Every week they compete against somebody else, or team versus team in like an Olympics kind of like almost like a fantasy hockey like tournament. And I've seen that worked really well. And it's great to do around like March Madness. And you can do like kind of like a basketball theme. And that's worked really well because of that competitiveness where people just start really bantering each other. And it's a lot of fun. And as a leader, it's really fun to watch as well.
I don't know if anybody on here is old enough to remember an old game show called Name That Tune. And I was a little kid when it was on. And the basic concept of it was, they give a clue about a song, 2 contestants, and I can name that song in 5 notes. Well, I can name that song in 4 notes. I can name that song in 3 notes. Okay, name that too. And then if she named it in 3 notes, she got the prize. If she didn't, the other person got the prize, right? And they just played 3 notes on the piano. Well, I've seen sales incentive structures where people or offices would compete against each other with that exact thing. We're going to beat quota by 20%. We're going to beat quota by 25%, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, beat quota. And then the way that the rewards were set up, they each got rewards. But if the team that said they do it beat their quota, then they got a lot more. They got much bigger rewards. It was always a stretch thing. So you just made that pop into my head, Taylor. That's really cool. That's an example of a fun, engaging, team-based incentive program. It's great.
I love that. And we've got, the poll showed people want the ideas specifically for remote work too. I've had a couple of questions in the chat about it. Maybe it would help kill 2 birds with 1 stone, give people some ideas to steal and just try for themselves. Do you mind if we round robin through this panel and each of you share, briefly, but soup to nuts, what was a program that you felt worked well for you or your teams, or that you saw during this remote period that would work for remote work? I won't put any one of you on the spot first, but I will take a volunteer.
I can start. There was a question in there about March Madness as well, so I'm happy maybe to just expand on that program that we did. So for March Madness, what we did is I would pick a different metric every single week, and that would be the metric they'd compete against. So for example, one week it would be dials, the next week it would be connects, the next week would be meeting set, and I actually changed it based on what I needed to happen that week. So I didn't tell them in advance. It was the last month of a quarter, and so I was monitoring throughout the week where we needed to kind of pick up the pace. And so I would change it every single week. And so every person would have a partner they'd be head to head against for whatever that metric was that week. If they won, they progressed to the next week. But I did also make it so there was like a B bracket. So everybody got to play except for, I think, like the last week. And so that was really exciting and motivating. And also I didn't want people to like hold out on booking meetings if they knew meetings was going to be the one the week after. So I had to be really careful on kind of when I revealed it. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump in as well. It's actually pretty similar, Taylor, but we did an Olympics one around the time of Olympics, and very similarly, each week it was a different metric based on what we kind of needed, and a lot of it built up to what we needed by the end of the month. So dials, emails, sets, SALs, etc. But one other thing we did is we changed the teams each week too, to get the teams more involved with each other. So it wasn't always team A versus team B. It might have been that one week, and then inbound versus outbound another week, and then random people a third week. So I thought that was really helpful too. So it got people to encourage others as well that they're not typically talking to. And then we had a team prize at the end of each week, which could be something small. So like if you're in the office, we literally did, you could pie your manager in the face, pick whichever one you wanted to pie, and they loved it. If you're not in the office, obviously you can think of other small things like that as well. Maybe a Zoom roast of your manager or something like that. And then at the end of all of it, we did bigger prizes as well. So it helped with team morale as well as moving towards those metrics we were trying to improve.
I love the team angle, and that's something I've really focused on in the past and seen be really successful. I think probably I've got to assume almost every single one of us on this call is trying to think how we onboard our new reps and our new team members quickly and in the most effective way. And one area that I found very effective is often when you'll have cohorts of people start at the same time, so say 5 new SDRs or even 2 new SDRs, or 5 AEs or 2 AEs, giving them the same ramp target that you've given every other new hiring cohort in the past, and then cumulatively giving them a target, and you can show what it is relative, how they're performing week over week relative to the other cohorts that have started in the past. And suddenly, like we've all probably had that experience where you have this kind of cool bond with the people that start at the same time as you. And this is one of those things that can really help nurture that and foster that, where it's like, okay, you 3 who just started, the highest ramp in number of past leads in the first 6 weeks has been this, go. And then just tracking it each week. And I tell you, the number of times that each new cohort actually beat the previous cohort was pretty impressive. And so there's that intrinsic pride, but we would also have prizes that we would associate with that. And that is something that you can do remotely. I think the other key thing here is it is so tough sometimes when you've got a team. A number of folks, I'm sure, that are early to mid-stage startups will have not segmented their sales teams yet. And so they might not have an SMB and mid-market and enterprise. So where you've got 6 AEs that are, but they may have all started at different times. So, and where you do have segmentation, where it is uneven, it's like, okay, I've only got 2 enterprise AEs, and I've got 2 mid-market and 3 SMB. Like, is that really exciting, pitting 2 people against each other? Often that's negative. So one thing you can do is have people compete on themselves on how did you do previous quarter over this quarter? How did you do this month over last month? And that way it kind of takes the sting out of the pointing the finger at other people, but it still keeps it competitive, and you can still have the smack talk and stuff, but you're just trying, it's kind of like golf. You're just trying to beat yourself, but you're still always kind of looking at what your buddy's doing in terms of how they did relative to last time. So those are some of the, John could speak more to the reward side of it, but that's what I would speak to in terms of the intrinsically, the feeling I try and get with our teams and how we've done that.
All such great ideas. And stuff, some I've seen before, some I haven't. I love the March Madness thing, the tournament thing, the pie in the face. Nothing's going to beat that. I mean, that's an experience. A couple of takeaways, things I'd recommend is don't forget what's called a fast start. Um, there's research that shows that once somebody has received something in a program they're a part of, they're 4 times more engaged with that program. And it doesn't matter what it is they got, right? But once they've received something, they're 4 times more engaged. So it's always a good idea to start with a fast start. So something that's low hanging fruit, and they can get something in the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever, right? Because then the program becomes real. It's tangible. You can touch it, feel it, smell it. So that's critical. And then another thing that kind of builds on a similar concept, old structure, but it's still really cool, is called the Great Race. And I'll use experiences because that's what we have. We say, okay, we've got big Salesforce, we've got 100 experiences. And here's examples of all these cool things you could do. We want you to do X, Y, and Z. The first 100 people to do that get an experience. When they're gone, they're gone. Get your experience, go now. So that is really engaging. It becomes a race. It's a friendly competition. I feel like I have control over whether or not I win, right? Because I can just work harder in the first couple of months and make sure I get one of those experiences. That's a really simple, frankly, concept for a rule structure, but it's also a capped budget. A lot of times in incentives, you have an open budget, which means I don't really know how many people are going to do this, so I don't really know what this is going to cost me. That's an example of a way to make it exciting to have a cap budget.
John, what about rewards? Excuse me, a bunch of questions in the chat about like things that work for remote. So I'm curious if you've seen anything particularly creative or particularly effective in terms of rewards in like a remote or virtual sales culture. I'm also kind of curious if you've seen any virtual rewards that just don't appear to work.
Well, it depends what you mean by work. I think one of the things that's critical is that if you have where it's different than compensation, right? That the reward and incentive program should have an effect that's ongoing, right? It's not just that they achieve the goal. You have an opportunity with an incentive program to form a firmer connection, to have an ongoing incremental performance from that group or that individual, right? So that's why you talk about virtual rewards. I can't think of a worse virtual reward than an extra deposit in your, automatic deposit in your checking account, closely followed by an e-gift card. Because if I use that e-gift card and I go and buy a telescope and somebody says, "Oh, cool telescope, where'd you get it?" I'm going to say I got it from X telescope store. But if I'm in the driveway with my kids and we're looking at the night sky and the astronomer's on my phone and my neighbor says, "Where'd you get the telescope?" I'm going to say I got it from my company. Right. So there's a very big difference between those two. And I think that becomes even more important with remote. I mean, much more important. Because in the pre-banter before the next sales meeting, people are going to be talking about, I'm not selling telescopes, by the way, but they're going to be talking about their telescope and their experience with the kids, or the greenhouse in the backyard, or swimming with dolphins. We'll go with dolphins at this point. That's a real way to have an ongoing effect, because the impact of something that is experiential grows in memory over time. It's like your vacation, right? It becomes better in memory than it probably actually was in real time. Same thing is true with an experience. So you want to make sure it's not just a thing. It's not just a transaction, a gift card, whatever. And I think that becomes even more important in a remote world.
One of the things that I haven't heard brought up, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but nobody here, I don't think, has talked about rewards in terms of like a virtual event like this one, like having a comedian come, give a virtual show for the team or something like that. Is that on purpose? Are y'all against virtual rewards that involve more looking at a screen, or is there a time and place for that?
We've done a couple of them, but to be honest, because team building events have all gone virtual as well over the last 2 years, I found that it was less motivating to do another virtual event as a team, because we usually already try to do those monthly or quarterly as a team or as an organization. So I think they felt less exciting to go after, because kind of we went through a lot of ideas in like the team building stuff. The ones that actually my team did like the best though were we did a lot of cocktail making classes where I would actually host them, because we found that like even if we hired somebody, it wasn't as fun. And so we'd get really silly. And I actually would make up facts. I would make a cocktail list and I would send them out the ingredient list. And I actually used to make up facts just to make it humorous. And in between every cocktail, we'd like everybody has to play like their top Spotify song from like their Christmas wrap up or holiday wrap up or whatever it's called. And so we'd make it like really engaging across our team. And actually those ones were really exciting and the team actually wanted to win those. But it was funny. It wasn't one where we hired somebody to do it. It was one we kind of created it ourselves to make it very personal and very like a bonding experience.
That's really cool. It's cool that you moved away from hiring a mixologist. I think I would have been too afraid to do that.
I know. I was like, there's a couple times where I'm like, this may turn out really terrible, but you know what? We're just going to go with it. And honestly, it was so funny. Some of them were not great, but it didn't really matter. It made it more entertaining. So.
I'll just quickly jump in and answer a question from Yaz there. My opinion here. She asked, what did you think about the competition like most improved sales performance with a minimum of 20 to 30% increase in sales this month versus their year-to-date average? I think a comparable versus their run rate is a great idea. I think maybe making it more like who can perform the most relative to their year-to-date average as opposed to 20 to 30%, because that would be a lot. But and I would keep in mind three things. Number one, as long as you're factoring in number of selling days per month as their quarter. Number two, as long as you're factoring in seasonality, and as long as lead flow stays similar. You're never going to get all of those perfect, but those are a few of the considerations I would have there.
I'll pile on top of that. It's also important to build in such a way that you're not rewarding somebody for having had a previous bad year.
Great point. Great point. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about frequency of spiffs and incentive programs? Yaz brought up a question which made me wonder. I used to do almost one a month. I would skip some months, but I probably did 9 a year when I was managing my team. Yaz brought up, do we recommend spiffs every 2 to 3 hours during a shift? If they reach a goal, they receive points. And it sounds like the idea being that ultimately you could redeem points for prizes. Anyway, so I guess the question to the group is like, what kind of rules or frameworks should we use to think about how frequently we should have incentive programs running and refreshing?
I think you got to be careful of spiff fatigue. I think if it's too frequent, people stop getting excited about them. And so I think it's important to change them up often and also be mindful of how many you're doing. So I usually also I do one a month typically, or one a quarter that's broken out, like each month is a different component or something. The only caveat to that is sometimes I'll do a month one where each week is like a smaller prize that leads up to like the grand finale, kind of like Lacey had mentioned with the Olympics. But my personal opinion is 2 to 3 hours is a lot, and it will die quickly. In probably a week or two, reps will probably not be as motivated by that. I mean, unless you're giving out like an experience every 2 to 3 hours, maybe that would be a different story. But if it's something small or incremental, I find spiff fatigue is real. And so you got to be careful of that.
I agree with Taylor. I like one a month, and you can make it towards, again, what you're trying to get out of the team, as well as switch up the prizes based on what motivates different people on your team. I do think if you are having a bad week, or you're seeing you need more energy on a specific day or something like that, you can always do a surprise spiff for the day and give out something smaller like swag or lunch the next day or breakfast. But I think as far as the bigger ones that are maybe more complex or you're working towards for a longer period of time, one a month makes the most sense.
Yeah, I'll build on that. That sounds about right to me too. Certainly little surprise programs are great. It's important that incentives, spiffs, whatever, not become an entitlement. And if it's all day, every day, repeated, it's the same thing. And it becomes an entitlement. It's just something that they're expecting. And now it's difficult to take away. One of the advantages with an incentive program versus compensation is you could change your incentive program, right? Especially if you have a history of having done that. You don't have to just set it and forget it. It runs for years. That's one of the challenges companies are running into with President's Club type programs. The annual group trip for top performers. It's just an entitlement. People just expect to go to Cabo and have beer on the beach, versus something, okay, we want to reallocate that and reward something different. So that's something I'd be cautious about having too many. It's not just, you're absolutely right, Taylor, it's spiff fatigue. And also, it just becomes an expectation.
I'm about to hopefully make this super fun. We've got about 13 minutes left. I don't even know if we need all that time. But Patrick just asked that it's sometimes hard to come up with prizes that everybody wants to compete for. So that's a good point, and we should note that maybe introduce a system where people can choose their prize. Like if you have a group of experiences, the person could choose the experience that they want most. You look like you had something to add there, John. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, this is going to be like I hired Patrick to ask this question. I don't know who Patrick is, but thank you, Patrick. That's kind of what we do. We have experiences, thousands of experiences all over the globe, and our clients pick a price point, and somebody gets their experience. They go online to our system, and they tell us where in the world they are. It is a Blue Board commercial, but it is answering the question. They tell us where in the world they are, and we present them a list of dozens and dozens of in-home experiences, local experiences, and depending on the level, it could be travel and or international, because we're up to $25,000 there on experiences. And then they're assigned a concierge, and their personal Blue Board employee concierge works with them to customize that experience to make sure it's exactly what they want. So therefore, the client doesn't have to choose anything. The participant absolutely positively gets what they want. And quite often, almost always, that involves time with their family or their significant other. And that's where the emotional impact comes in. Okay, I'll stop. I could talk about this for a while, but that has answered the question.
One thing I'll ask is, I feel that when it comes to structure, communication, design, and all that, I've got some deep experience and all that, but certainly not an expert on what some of the folks are asking here in terms of what are the specific things. Like if someone's boss says, "Hey, how was that sales hacker call today? And what did Blue Board say we should do right now? What are some gifts ideas?" Can you throw out that? What are the most famous or the most popular actual things people are I think people are wondering, is it AirPods? Is it and if it's things or if it's experiences? I know you've given a couple examples there, but I'm certainly curious because I am reevaluating my spiffs for this year. I got a really good idea as to how I'm going to structure them, how I'm going to communicate them, but it's the things that I want to I'd love to pick your brain on, or anyone else on the panel.
So I want to introduce that we have a couple things to wrap up, but before we do that, I want to play a game with the panel, if you'll indulge me. Can we? Hopefully, we're going in order. Oh, you know what I'll do? Everybody, you say an idea for a creative reward or prize that you like, and then call on somebody else, and they have to say a reward or prize that they like, and then call on somebody else. And if you hesitate, you're out. And last person standing wins something. I don't know what yet because I'm making this up on the spot. Will you all indulge me on that? That way our audience leaves with a list of cool ideas. That's the goal. Heck
yeah, I'll indulge you on that. I don't know. I hope I can represent fairly the teams of the people that are on the call, but I'll tell you what I would do. Do I get to start? Okay, AirPods. Sorry. I knew someone was going to take that, so I just had to get it out there.
All right, fair enough. AirPod. Yeah. So then popcorn it to one of the panelists. Oh, Dave, it's on you.
I don't think he understood. I'll go for now.
All right.
Cheese making class, Lacey.
I'm in Utah, so a ski day.
Yeah.
Taylor, it's me. One I keep hearing of the Dyson Airwrap, which is very random, but every female on my team this year and last year has said, I want a Dyson Airwrap because it's something I will never buy myself, but like it's something I really want.
Very cool. $300 gift certificate, 150 goes towards you, and you've got 15 different choices, of which your team's already said they're interested in. The other 150 goes to a charity of your choice.
Sailing in the Bay. Lacey.
Gift certificate for dinner, a fancy dinner out with your family.
I'm going to finish like a Sonos speaker.
Cool. Online comedian. Like in a specific Zoom with a comedian, etc.
Online sommelier experience.
I've gotten a lot for minky blankets, so I'm gonna go with that one.
A popular Salesforce one is a Yeti cooler.
You got to go with the telescope. Everyone loves telescopes in space.
You stole mine, Dave. I'm gonna go back to swimming with sharks because I would do that.
I'll throw out golf lessons.
Is this back to me?
Sure.
I think I'm out. I think I'm hesitating. Taylor.
My last one would say an Apple Watch because we had a sales incentive recently and I won one and I was excited about it.
All right. For the master big grand prize of Peloton.
Ooh.
Yeah, fishing. Day of fishing.
I'm out. That's those are my main ideas.
All right.
Dave and John.
I get to go head to head with John. This is great. All right. I'm going to go with shoes of your choice. Everyone has to wear them. Everyone has different things they like: running, hiking, biking, skiing. A pair of biking shoes for like racing is like, $300-400. That'd be amazing. Any kind of shoes you want, you choose. Then it's customized.
3 days in Thailand at an elephant rescue, caring for elephants, and then 10 days at a private island resort.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know I had that kind of budget. Shoes suck now.
Shoes.
5 months in Hawaii.
That's a real experience. We really do have them.
Wow, that's cool. I'm gonna say skydiving, but not everyone loves it. So you give them a bevy of things. It's either skydiving or it's an theme being adventure, right? So it can either be like go-kart racing, skydiving, etc. And so adventure theme, 10 options. The team will have pre-picked 15 options, so they're interested in some of them. It needs to be inclusive and make sure physically everyone could has something in there they can do. But that's what that would be one.
How about a nice piece of art for their home?
That's nice. A private chef coming to make a dinner for them and their friends.
All right. I'm going to go with, it's so bad when you start looking around the room at things. Right? I'm like, I'm going to go with Birkenstocks. Wait, I already did the shoe thing. I think John's just going to win this one. I'm out.
The irony of this is that I would say, I don't want to overstate this. One of the worst things when you talk about the rewards, it's rule structure, communication, rewards. One of the worst things a sales leader or anybody can do is try to guess what will motivate their people. Because I remember when iPads first came out, and I was a young one, and everybody was getting their sales team iPads as an incentive. Yeah, that worked unless they already had one, and everybody in their family already had. Then there's no incentive whatsoever, right? So guessing what somebody wants that's a slippery slope. That's a really dangerous place to go. And also, I'll say people that really focus on guessing what their people want, when they think incentive, they think prize. And that's the third consideration, right? It's rule structure, communications, then reward. An incentive is a program, a reward is a part of it.
That was a great summary. Thank you, John. Okay, so to wrap up, everybody, remember rule structure, communication, then reward in that order for your incentive programs. What other good takeaways that Taylor, Lacey, Dave, what was your biggest takeaway from this conversation?
For me, it just reaffirmed the importance of customization, right? Of ensuring that what you're doing is all politics is local, as they say, right? So it's what your team cares about, not what I might love a Peloton, but someone else might not.
Completely
thanks.
agree on that part. And then it's attainable and it's not too complex. It can be communicated easily and everyone can get behind it. That buy-in.
Right on.
Something we
Thanks,
didn't really
Lacey.
talk about today. We didn't really talk about it, but I think it came up in a lot of themes of like people like guessing. I would say just as like a final tip, don't be afraid to ask your team. I am like a big fan of team surveys. I do them probably monthly to understand like not only about incentives, but like what they want to learn, what they want to like, how they want to develop, what they really liked about last month, and also like what prizes would you like to win, and what would you like to see that we should incentivize as a team. So don't be afraid to ask your team how and get them involved in the creation of your incentives as well.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I have one last poll for the audience here, coming at you right now. We talked about a lot of stuff that's related to what Blueboard does today. If it sounds like Blueboard can help you, and I think they can, they work with all kinds of amazing companies like Glassdoor and GoPro and Procter and Gamble and Shake Shack. Go ahead and hand raise here, and we'll reach out. No pressure. If you don't want to talk to them, that's okay. A couple quick shout outs too. If you aren't in the Sales Hacker community, there's all kinds of really cool conversations like this going on there all the time. So if you're ever stumped, like you need feedback from other sales folks, that's a great place to ask for input. And if you want to hear what the most innovative minds in go-to-market are doing, check out the Revenue Innovators podcast. Harish and Mary are the hosts. They're awesome. And they've insisted that we do not allow them to interview people who are on every other podcast. So you're going to hear some pretty novel guests there. All right, gang. That's it. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for showing up and being attentive and keeping that chat active and all the great questions. I love this community so much. This is a great, best part of my week. And thanks to the panel. Really great to have you all here. Taylor, Lacey, Dave, and John, really appreciate you coming and sharing your insights and experience with the community.